Everybody, welcome. I'm really excited to be here today with my man, Robert Cheeke, at his hometown. And we're actually on the farm where he grew up, where it all started. And we're going to be talking about his new book coming out, The Impactful Vegan. And I'm really looking forward to today and the things that we're going to be creating. So to launch this off, Robert, can you dive into a little bit about the book, what inspired you to start, and what the people can expect?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Alex, thank you, my man.
My man.
One of the best in the business. Always appreciate you. Thank you for coming out here to where I grew up, man. I mean, right here in this barn, I used to, bottle feed baby calves and walk ponies and, take care of rabbits and chickens and goats, and not just around here, but up there and that field and that barn and over there. So it's good to have you here, man.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so The Impactful Vegan, man.
Yes.
How'd that start? Well, it started with another book.
Yeah.
Peter Singer's book, The Most Good You Can Do.
Mm-hmm.
I picked it up randomly in a bookstore. I was actually looking for Animal Liberation. They didn't have it. It was a big used bookstore in Boulder, Colorado.
Okay.
A new and used bookstore. And I found this book, The Most Good You Can Do. It was introducing this topic called effective altruism. Didn't know anything about it, never heard of it. But I read the book. I loved it. It was all about how to use our resources, our time, our energy, our connections, our skills, our talents to reduce the most human suffering, which is largely based on alleviating global poverty.
Sure.
So how can we most effectively help the poorest people who are suffering to the greatest degree? So I read that book, I loved it, a lot of great ideas in there, and that inspired me to read William McCaskill's book, Doing Good Better.
Doing Good Better.
Doing Good Better. So Peter Singer's The Most Good You Can Do, William McCaskill's Doing Good Better. They both talked about this idea of effective altruism, which effective altruism is basically, again, how can we do the most good for the people around the world?
Yes.
And so not how can we do some good, or how can we be somewhat effective, or how can we contribute? No, it's how scientifically we can do the most good. So when you evaluate based on all these quantifiable factors,
Yes.
dozens of factors, maybe 100 different factors,
A lot of variables.
what does the most good, right? Which organizations are more effective than others? If we're thinking about donating money or volunteering our time, or getting involved in, or which careers actually can make the biggest impact? Is that being a doctor or a nurse or a teacher or an engineer, or in the tech space and raising $1 billion or whatever it is? And there are all these concepts that were introduced, like earn to give, for example, which goes against the idea of following your passion. Where, when you follow your passion, you end up doing whatever work that leads to. It may not be effective at all. It ends up being oftentimes self-serving, where my desires for what makes me most excited is more important than how I serve the world.
Still an inherent self-interest involved
There is.
rather than like a genuine just giving nature.
Yeah, there's this self-interest in there that pursuing your passion could actually be a bad idea when it comes to how we can do the most good. Because how often do your passions line up with the most charitable work there is to do in the world?
Right.
Not very often. But that's where they introduce this concept of earning to give, where maybe you find some area of work that matches your skill set, talent, maybe something you've learned or went to school for, or that you're just naturally good at.
Sure.
That maybe it doesn't scratch your itch as much, it doesn't make you light up. You're not quite as passionate about it, but man, you can make a lot of money to then give to the right cause, or to the most effective causes. And not everybody loves that idea, because for some people that's too capitalistic, that's too focused on making money, that's too focused on business, that's too analytical, why not enjoy life more rather than doing this job in an office, high stress, Wall Street environment. We don't like it, even if it makes 7 figures. Maybe that's not worth it. So people have different opinions, but the beauty behind an evidence-based approach is that opinions fall to the wayside
Sure.
and defer to data, evidence, and science. So there actually is, that's the beauty of it. There's a science that will tell you how effective you are.
And that was a question that I even had for myself, because I love to be able to contribute, make impact,
Yeah.
do the most good. And a lot of the situations that come up that maybe stop us or prevent us from doing the most good is just knowing how.
Yeah.
Having the know-how. And I feel like that the quest of this book for you is, how can I be the most impactful vegan that I can be for this specific topic? That's what I gathered. And then you're giving people the tools on how to do that.
Yeah, and so actually I was out here on the farm. I mean, just right behind me here, there's a walnut orchard. And I read Peter Singer's book, read William McCaskill's book, also read Nick Cooney's book. I think his is titled How to Be Great at Doing Good. They all have very similar titles, right? The most good you can do, doing good better, how to be great at doing good.
Right.
But it's all understanding the science of effective altruism and how we can make the greatest impact. Biggest bang for your buck, however you want to describe it. So I was out here picking up walnuts, hours every day, just by myself, thinking. I didn't have headphones on, no music, no podcast, just me under a bunch of trees, by myself, doing manual labor, agricultural harvesting, by myself, thinking. And that's when I thought, man, if these approaches are so good at reducing global poverty in areas like sub-Saharan Africa, in areas, in poor regions in Asia, in Central America, South America, and throughout the Western and developed world too, but particularly impacting the poorest people in the world. I mean, people that if they maybe don't get mosquito nets in sub-Saharan Africa, they could get infected by malaria and even die. Sure. And yet it's maybe only a couple dollars to get a poor kid in Africa a mosquito net where he or she can sleep and feel not at risk of contracting this deadly disease. Or all the work that organizations do to prevent diarrhea, which kills, 1 million or 2 million people every year, maybe even kids. I have the numbers in various iterations of my book.
Sure.
I may not have them memorized, but those are big deals. Right. We're talking about millions and millions of lives, and doing something like just getting access to cleaner water or bed nets, to prevent mosquito bites, or getting the right amount of food to someone in a region where it's only 50 cents for a meal, or $1 for a meal for an entire family, where the US dollar stretches so far. So I thought, if all of these things work on a global level to reduce global poverty, man, what could we do using similar approaches to reduce animal suffering in the greatest way, which is focusing on farmed animals, those who are being killed for food, which is where 99.99% of animal suffering takes place.
Wow.
It's in the food system. And I mean, it happens here where I grew up. There's cows out in the field. There's a chicken right there. There's cows out in the field that are unfortunately going to be turned into someone's meal. I don't run the farm. It's my family's thing. I'm not involved.
Sure.
But that's the reality of it, that it's not, there's a lot of issues to be worried about.
Right.
Rodeos, circuses, zoos, SeaWorld, leather wallets, shoes, belts, vivisection, animal testing, but all that combined is less than 1% of animal suffering. 99.99% of it is in the global food system. So that's what we've got to address. How do we get animals out of the food system as much as possible? And so I thought about that, and I realized that I'm in my 29th year as a vegan, started right here on this farm, and I was hell-bent on being effective. My entire life. That's what got me into fitness and bodybuilding.
Yes.
From the beginning was to show that you could build your body without animal protein, and that could inspire other people to do the same, and then give people the confidence that they could be vegan athletes and build muscle, build their bodies without having to kill, raise, slaughter animals.
Sure.
And consume them. And so I always had effectiveness
right
on my mind. it was initially called The Effective Vegan, the book title. We changed it to Impactful later on, but that's what I had on my mind. I wanted to be effective for animals, and I felt like I had identified over 2.5 decades many methods and strategies and approaches that were more effective than others. So when I read works by philosophers Peter Singer and William McCaskill, and by Nick Cooney and by a few others, that resonated with me because I recognized a lot of these strengths and weaknesses that many people have within our space, within this space of veganism, vegan movement, not necessarily maybe animal rights umbrella, but I would say under this vegan umbrella, there's many layers to that.
Sure.
And I thought that I can do something here. I could write about this topic, and it's not just going to be me and my ideas, even though I thought I had some good ones. So I went out and interviewed 30 to 40 world leading authorities within the vegan movement, within the plant-based community, within the animal rights community. These are nonprofit founders and presidents. These are for-profit CEOs. These are many leaders of the largest NGOs and leading animal rights and vegan organizations in the world. These are chefs and authors, athletes, and a variety of others who, through their work, make a tremendous impact on reducing animal suffering. And I wanted to learn from them what's worked best, like how they make a difference and how they measure that, how do they quantify that, and how does that fit into this idea of this term that I coined of effective vegan altruism.
Right.
Using effective altruism, adding the vegan spin to it, and basically positioning this whole approach of reducing suffering, focus on animals.
Finding an effective method and figuring out how you can apply that into the field you've been applying it to essentially for almost 3 decades now.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty exciting experience to be able to pull from so many power and strengths from so many people across the world, from various backgrounds, diving into one main topic.
Yeah, and I learned a lot. It raises a bunch of questions. If I were to ask you, not to put you on the spot, but ask you, ask anybody out there, do you consider yourself an impactful vegan? And so first think about that, either yes, no, or maybe, or I need more info, however you want to answer that. So,
sure.
Do you consider yourself an impactful vegan? Number one. Number two, how do you quantify that?
Sure.
How do you quantify, how are you more impactful than either your prior self or somebody else? How do you quantify this way you describe yourself?
Sure.
If indeed you do think that you are impactful. And I would also ask a couple other questions.
Sure.
How many animal lives do you spare every year through your actions, your purchase power, your giving, your volunteer work, your greater work that you do? This is a number many people can actually calculate and figure out for themselves.
Right.
So what is that number? So how many animals do you spare per year as someone who exists on this planet, in this world? What difference do you make in the lives of others, and how do you quantify that? And then I would also ask, and don't, and this is not to offend you or offend you or anybody else, but an honest question.
Yes.
And give me a number. What % of your annual income do you donate to help animals? And that's either donating to the most effective animal charities or following some of the methods like that I described, like the Vegan Strong method or the Vegan Kaizen system, or leveraging your Strong V, which is your skills, talents, resources, other strengths, network, generosity, and volunteering. How do you use all of that to contribute a percentage of your annual income to reduce animal suffering, and what percentage, a figure is that?
Yes.
It's an important question because there's a lot of people who, I don't want to say claim, I don't want to use these kind of words. Let's say there's a lot of people, even in the vegan world, who are just passionate about helping animals.
Right.
But if you ask them, so what % of your income do you contribute to the most worthy animal charities? What do you mean?
Exactly.
0? What do you? No, I support vegan restaurants. I go to I volunteer at Sanctuary. I buy vegan food. I only buy vegan groceries. I post on Facebook and Instagram about it. Fair enough. That equates to one total of animal lives spared based on your contributions to reducing animal suffering. It's a completely different ballgame when you contribute, oftentimes financial resources, to the most effective organizations helping animals. I mean, the ones that have dedicated decades of their work. They're more well-versed than you and I. They've worked in this field for many, many years, decades, in fact. That's what they specialize in. They specialize in reducing animal suffering for the lowest cost per individual life spared. For example, one of the organizations I interviewed in the book, it's a big one, big animal organization, animal welfare organization. Most people have probably heard of them. They're able to spare a chicken's life, like these chickens you see running around, for as little as 33 cents. That's pretty effective.
Yeah,
three lives spared per dollar, and that's here in the U.S. Now imagine how far the U.S. dollar goes in Africa, in parts of Asia, in Central America, South America. I've been to many of these places. I've been to 5 continents. I've been to some very poor places. I've seen incredible exchange rates. For example, I just came back. I was just in Southeast Asia. As you know, I brought you back some souvenirs. I had a giant meal, huge dinner for 2. Me and my friend Jordan, who worked on this book with me. A big dinner for 2 plus 2 drinks, for something like $7 US.
Wow.
I stayed in a nice hotel, like nice. I mean, you would consider that nice hotel here, $28 a night. The point is, U.S. and that was in a major city in Bangkok. You get out to poorer rural areas or poorer countries. Just go across the border to Laos, Cambodia. I mean, or when I was in Indonesia, I was getting massive plates of vegan food for like $1.50, $2. It just shows that no matter what you're trying to do, purchase goods, buy food, buy equipment, pay for transportation, whatever it is, the US dollar can stretch so much farther outside of our country's borders. And so if one organization that's mostly based in the US, although they have global offices too, is able to spare an individual chicken's life for 33 cents, imagine that you might be able to get that down to 3 or 4 cents outside of the US. So in the book, I encourage people to look into contributing to organizations that are outside of the United States as well, particularly in the developed world, for many other reasons too. And I don't want to,
yeah, sure.
I mean, I wrote 1,000 pages for the book, only 300 are going to make it to print, but some of these things are rather obvious, but we don't often think about them. That not only does the dollar stretch so much further, but just think about the conditions animals might be in, their access to veterinary care outside of, I mean, in a developing country.
Sure.
The living conditions they might be in, the weather conditions. I mean, blazing hot in Africa and in other parts of the world, or freezing cold in other parts of the world, where they may not have, even if you want to even say, the more livable conditions of a factory farm in the United States. Animals have it even worse off in many parts of the world. So it's not just how far the dollar stretches, but also considering all these other factors of climate, of environment, of water quality, of air quality, of lack of veterinary care, medicine, treatment, rehabilitation during injuries or sickness or whatever, that may not happen for these animals elsewhere. And that's just another reason why to strongly consider supporting organizations that are outside of the United States, where they can do even more good.
And for me, when I read about that got me really excited too, because it really widens your perspective as to how much good you can do, not just within your own city, town, state, country, but like what can you really do throughout, and how can you make the most out of your impact and your dollars. And
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's map that onto humans for a second.
Sure.
I think I give this example in the book. What's funny is even though I just read the book word for word a few weeks ago, there were so many chapters removed.
Yes.
You know that. I talked to you during the process of writing this book that even when it was done, I submitted it. They took out 5 chapters and said, write a couple new ones. It was too long. It was 400 pages. They said these chapters got to go.
Yeah.
So I don't remember exactly if this example made it into the book. I think it did. But let's just take humans, for example. Is it more beneficial to help starving children in the United States, or maybe in a very poor African or Asian nation, perhaps?
Sure.
Well, in the United States, there's all kinds of government intervention, all kinds of assistance, whether that's from other citizens, from churches and free meals and all this kind of stuff, whether it's welfare and free meals through the public school system, whether it's goodwill from just other American citizens who are much more affluent than almost any other nation in the world. It's very likely that you're going to get some extra help in the U.S. If you're struggling and you can hold a sign, get people to help you, food banks, all kinds of things.
HUD housing even.
Yeah, there's Food Not Bombs organization I've worked with off and on over the years that donates free food to anyone who's hungry. You won't find those services in every country.
Sure.
Right? And so you can evaluate that, like if I'm going to choose which is it's hard to say things like worthy cause because people get offended oftentimes.
Sure.
Just like if you were to say it may be more mathematically and ethically consistent to help chickens rather than dogs, that might bother people. Sure. Because they're closer to dogs, just like people listening are probably closer to Americans and might be like, no, we got to take care of Americans first before other, these poor kids elsewhere. But that's not how you look at things from an effective altruism perspective. You look at, how do I do the most good? Sure. This kid in the U.S., yes, he or she is poor. Yes, they're hungry. Yes, they may be even starving. But are they more likely to get support than a kid in this other poor country that's just eating, off the ground and fighting with stray dogs for food, which is true in India and other places. We can easily see that if I only have $100, it's got to go to the kid in India, not the kid in the United States. Sure. Just because of the statistical likelihood of that kid getting help here locally at a food bank or at a shelter, at a church, at a you name it. We have the wealth, we have the affluence, and we have the population density and the government interventions and influence that person's probably going to be better off than the kid who's actually literally going to starve and maybe just die.
Sure.
Which we have about, as you probably know, 800 million people die of starvation, and 2 billion who are food inadequate and starving globally. There's a lot we can do outside of our borders, and that just totally equates to animals in these other regions as well.
I love that you're coming from a place of, yes, of course we want to impact the people here close, as in that example. You're not saying let's not impact those people. It's more of an urgency. Think of, am I going to schedule a doctor's appointment for something that's minor, or am I going to go to the emergency room for something that's immediate? So, you're acknowledging the challenges and the importances of taking care of as much as we can, but you're just focusing on, hey, well, for the time right now, what are these most urgent, immediate things that we can do and should do, and what are the processes in doing that? So, it's not this or, it's more and. I want to do this but in the meantime, I really want to figure out how I can really quantify my impact to do the most good.
Yeah.
Right? So it's all coming from a great place of wanting to contribute and do good. It's just you're highlighting and really narrowing down the needs.
And most people don't know the needs.
Right.
Most people, you might see there's an unfortunate natural disaster. You hear about it on the news. Giant tsunami, wipes out all kinds of people and animals, flooding, all this kind of stuff.
Home's gone, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a call to action to donate. It's actually probably not in your best interest to donate. Now, Robert, what are you talking about? You just offended me. you bothered me with that one. It's because of neglect.
Right.
So the reason you don't donate to disaster relief is because everyone else is already doing it.
Right.
Everyone else it's already on the radar. It's on every news station. All the most popular news anchors are talking about it. It's all over social media. Donate to whatever organization is getting disaster relief funds. And sometimes these organizations collecting funds get way more funds than they can even use in this disaster relief situation. And those funds could have been allocated somewhere else, like to starving people or abused animals elsewhere, outside of the United States, or outside of wherever that disaster is. That disaster could be in Asia or in Africa or elsewhere. But the point is, we have to look at areas that are neglected when it comes to how to contribute to reducing suffering. And that's just one example.
Sure.
That everyone's already doing it, and so you adding your extra $100 is not that big of a deal. But you putting $100 somewhere else that is neglected and they could really use it for life-changing work, that's important. You made a good point, and it's actually a point that one of the philosophers made in their book as well, when you have to prioritize. So when I was saying, you weigh that out, do I give the $100 to the American kid or to the kid in a very poor, truly poor country? You have to pick the kid in India or Bangladesh or wherever it is. I use India as my example. And you were talking about how it's not necessarily one or the other, or you prioritize based on a sense of urgency.
Sure.
So in one of the books, I don't remember which one it was. It probably was William McCaskill's book, Doing Good Better. He was talking about doctors in wartime have to do the exact same thing.
Right.
You've got someone who is, their leg just got blown off or whatever, and you've got to stop the bleeding, or this person's not going to make it. Or someone who has a scratch, on their forehead, and they're bleeding, but it can wait. Or someone who's bruised and they're kind of bent over because they just wind got knocked out of them. But other people are actually bleeding to death, and they need to go get tourniquet stuff applied to them to save their life or save their limbs. You do that first. And so what they did was, there were all these wounded soldiers on the battlefield, and they simply labeled them 1, 2, or 3 in areas of priority. 1 means I need to get right away. Number, this person is bleeding like crazy. We need to save their life. Number 2, maybe lost a limb or whatever. Again, I got performed surgery, whatever. They're next in line. Number 3, I sprained my ankle, and I can't walk. And I'm more likely to I might get harmed because I can't get out of harm's way, especially in a wartime situation. But I'm not urgently dying at that moment, right? I can maybe hide in the bushes or behind a tree or whatever. Right. So it's about prioritizing. There is a sense of urgency, and that's why I focus this book so much on the food aspect. There is a sense of urgency that if we can change the way food is made, change the way protein is delivered through plants or other means other than through animals, alternative proteins of all different types, fermentation, cultivated meat, plant-based proteins, whatever. If we can change that, then we can have a really big impact on supply and demand and the number of animals that are required in the factory farm system. That number can just be dramatically reduced. And then all of a sudden, you're sparing millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of animal lives that don't need to be bred, born, raised, and slaughtered specifically only to be consumed as food.
Right. And
those other byproducts that come from that, leather and other things that are a byproduct of animals that are no longer producing enough milk or getting too old to produce whatever you're trying to get them to produce.
And like the question that you just asked me a little bit ago, hey, what are those numbers? How do you quantify that? How do you measure that? Because we all have good intentions, right? And we all have our answers. And you're not coming from a place of negative judgment or point the finger saying, hey, you're not doing enough. It's not coming from that place. It's coming from compassionate inquiry to really understand, hey, how much am I doing and what more could I do? Or could I just turn the knob a little bit and have a much more greater impact? And these are things that we all want to know. And if we can take ourselves outside of that, not take things personally, and really think and ask the question, what can I do? And how do I do that? That's really what this entails and speaks about.
Yeah.
And so together we can do a major move on being the most impactful. And this is giving everybody the tools in order to do that.
Yeah, that's what it's designed to be.
Yeah.
This is not a why vegan book.
Yeah.
It already assumes that readers care about animals. I'm not going to explain why to be vegan. It's not a how-to vegan book. It's not a single recipe in the book. There's nothing like that.
Right.
This is simply about how we can use our skills and talents and resources, connections, our network, our volunteering, our generosity to reduce the most animal suffering.
Yes.
And it aims to answer that monumental question, that what actions do the most good?
Yeah.
And obviously I come to some conclusions, in the book. There's 300 pages into it, you get the answer. There are actually answers all throughout.
Sure.
There's answers all throughout, because even midway through the book, we really spotlight 4, but mention about 10 of the most effective animal charity organizations in the world. And these are based on all kinds of factors that have been scrutinized, evaluated. Actually, over 3,000 animal charities have been evaluated, and these are, the top 10. And so you can donate to one organization or another.
Yes.
And in some cases, Alex, some, believe it or not, are not 10 times more effective, or 100 times more effective. Some actually are even 1,000 times more effective.
Wow.
And that's true. That's true with that's true with how you can donate to causes that benefit humans too. Which, by the way, there's over 1 million charities that help benefit humans. Wow. With animals, it's if I had to guess, 10,000 compared to over 1 million.
Sure.
Let's say maybe even 1.5 million now.
Extraordinary difference.
The extraordinary difference. Animals are almost always overlooked. Almost always overlooked, underappreciated, pushed to the wayside. And we put our human interests first, which is biologically understandable, but we also need to look out for our fellow animals. And there are some organizations that are just so much better than others. What I mean by that is how much change they create. So some organizations are able to pass legislation that may impact billions of animals because they have that political influence. Some organizations may work with, there's one, for example, I wrote about in the book that works with about 2,500 different food companies. And so they're able to have influence there on reducing animals used in the food system because of the relationships with these thousands of food companies. There are other organizations that are publicly traded, and they invest into every food company in America. Therefore, they have an influence. They have a seat at the table to influence the types of foods those companies make. The biggest food companies in the world, the Kraft, the Heinz, whatever, Kellogg, Post, all those companies. They have an influence there, or they may work with retailers like Whole Foods Market, Walmart, Costco, and have an influence there on the types of products that are allowed to be sold that come from less cruel environments, and to reduce that suffering whenever possible, or the fact that some organizations can spare an animal's life, like I told you, for 33 cents, where maybe for other organizations it cost them $10, it cost them $20. It's just like, and I try to tie it all in and make a lot of these parallels and all this kind of stuff. But it's kind of like when we go on tour. You and I have toured together with Vegan Strong for years, and that's just one of the things that we've done. We've toured doing other things together, and I'm honored to do that with you.
Likewise.
And I think you're fantastic. But you would agree that some of the events we've gone to are more influential than others based on the demographic. Like, for example, we go to a consumer show. Let's say it's a big one, like the Olympia for bodybuilding.
Sure.
You've got a very small portion of people who are interested
Right.
in a plant-based lifestyle or vegan diet. They're using things like anabolic steroids, many of them, the fans as well. They're into as much animal protein as possible. They're into consuming as many animals as possible. Like, the more animal protein, the better. This mindset.
Sure.
It's still effective. It's still effective that we reach that audience and that we show them another way. But what's the statistical likelihood of them adopting that lifestyle and embracing it and changing their worldview and all this kind of stuff? And then, it's small.
Especially when their meals are dialed in, they're already prepped, they've been doing what's worked for them in terms of what they're looking to accomplish.
Yeah, and they've already been coached by someone, or they've been influenced by media and magazines and documentaries and books and all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
But then you go to another event with like industry professionals where it's not open to the public. You can't even get in unless you're a dietitian, a personal trainer, a coach, physical therapist, a manufacturer, a retailer in the industry of fitness. So now when you have a thoughtful conversation about plant-based diets or veganism or whatever with a registered dietitian who oversees an entire department or an entire company, and someone who's already attuned to benefits of plant-based diet or benefits of plant nutrients, all this kind of stuff, and you just help show them in physical forms, successful vegan athletes, it helps maybe reinforce that, and then they have a greater influence because they're the ones in charge. They're the ones designing the meal plans. Let me give you a local example. I've got a friend here I grew up with. I'm actually hoping to see him while I'm here in my hometown. He works now just a few towns up in Salem at the largest public school system in the state of Oregon. Okay, he's an allergen specialist, and he helps design the meal plans, the menus for the public school system in the Salem-Keizer district, which again is the largest public school system in the state capital in the state. Well, he happens to be a vegan guy, and that happens to be from my influence, just as a friend of his and a mentor, and giving him my books. And anyway, we've known each other since we were kids, but he only adopted a plant-based diet about 3 years ago, and vegan lifestyle. And so now he's in a position where he has this ethical perspective, veganism, and knowledge of food, and being an allergen specialist and creating the menus and meal plans for children in the largest school system in the state. And because of this ethical influence and his nutritional influence, he can design more plant-based items for the menu and remove more of the things like the corn dogs and chicken nuggets and fish sticks and all of that, which can lead to a healthier population.
Right.
So that's just another example of organizations or individuals. A lot of this is about individuals too. It's about what you and you and you and you and you and you and I and you can do as individuals to make a difference. Even if you don't work for the public school system, or even if you don't go on tour with Vegan Strong, even if you're not a celebrity, even if you're not a teacher or in these other areas of influence, there's so much you can do. And I also tell you, sometimes it's as simple as writing an opinion letter to the most popular newspapers in the country or in the world and getting that published and reaching millions of people.
Yes, and even in my story, I was out disc golfing here locally with a person who wasn't a vegan, but who went to school with you in high school, and there, I was chatting with him about, me transitioning to this vegan lifestyle. And he says, "Hey, yeah, no, I went to school with the guy, and he's took off, a great success with that field." I said, "Oh, really?" And then that's how I heard of you, and then looked into you got your first book, and so just even the impact that you have for vegans, non-vegans, of everybody. So you may not be able to reach an impact with somebody to the degree that you're attempting or looking to do, but you may be able to impact somebody else as a I wouldn't say a byproduct, but as an example of that. You may be able to have a continual impact even through people you just know.
Absolutely. An example, Alex, and man, whew, it's cold out here.
I'm feeling it.
I know, I can see like your nose getting red. You don't have the hat on like I do.
I was smart. I was going to stay there. It's going to freeze there.
Yeah,
it's like Jim Carrey with the icicles.
Yeah.
You know,
I know, it is like,
scooter out here.
we should have brought like blankets out here, and I'm wearing like thin jeans.
Yeah, we're
Luckily, I got the boots on.
farm and ready.
But man,
That's
it is
right.
cold. But just
You all right?
as an example, yeah, we might have to get up and stretch in a moment,
Cold.
or go move to the sun over there. But nothing runs like a deer, man. Nothing runs like a deer.
Nope.
So just as an example, you know, I got my start in veganism through my older sister. So
Tanya.
yeah, so in today's day and age, you know, she doesn't have, let's say, much of a social media influence or anything like that. Although she's somewhat active on Twitter, I've noticed. But she doesn't reach a lot of people. You know, she's a professor at a university teaching soil microbiology, lives her quiet, you know, vegan life with her family, vegan family. She's been vegan for 30 years now. But, you know, she influenced a firecracker like me. And then I went on to go do my thing. Magazine covers, you know, champion vegan bodybuilder multiple times over, New York Times best-selling book, filmed a documentary, toured to 5 continents, been on speaking tour for 20 years, impact, you know, reached millions of people. But that started with her, you know? So even anyone listening here, even if you don't have like a big audience or big following, it's who you might be able to influence. I mean, I take zero credit for this, and it doesn't have anything to do with me. But for example, I was interviewing James Cameron, you know, Terminator and Titanic and all that stuff. Avatar. I was actually at an Avatar red carpet premiere. I was interviewing him on the red carpet, and I was asking him about veganism, and he wasn't vegan. He wasn't vegan. That interview's up on YouTube. You can watch it. I can't remember what I asked him, but we had a brief conversation about it. But sure enough, you know, a year or two later, he became vegan. Again, not from my influence, but it just the context of here's a guy of pretty big influence. You know, one of the biggest movie directors of all time, and at the time I interviewed him, he wasn't vegan. He later got on that, I think from Forks Over Knives influence, perhaps, and from a few friends. And then he goes on to invest $1 million and oversee, you know, he was kind of the big headliner producing the Game Changers, which, you know, James Wilkes created, but, you know, Jim Cameron put his name behind it and put his money behind it. And then the Game Changers went on to become arguably the most watched documentary in history. Because of how it did domestically, and then it did massively well internationally. And it's considered to be one of the most watched documentaries in history. And Cameron getting on board with whatever influence it was, I think it was Forks Over Knives, helped him do that. And so, you know, it's a book, it's a news article, it's a documentary, it's a conversation.
Yes.
All those things add up. And even in the book, in The Impactful Vegan, we talk about even which ones of those are most effective.
Right.
Like is a book more effective than a billboard? Well, we know the answer.
Right.
Because there have been surveys, studies, surveys to determine that. And organizations have put in the work to identify that. Like, are celebrities influential or not? We know the answer. And I wrote about the answer, and it's probably going to surprise some people.
Yes. And I bet that, speaking of surprise, of diving down this quest and this journey, especially from being somebody who's, you know, obviously been in this for almost 3 decades now, you know, moving on to your 30th year.
Yeah.
You know, when you went on this yourself, I bet that was really interesting because you've written prior books, you know, you've toured the country, you toured the world. And, you know, for you was it, what was that experience like of meeting with these people? And was there any wow factors? Was there any, like, wow, I've been doing this for a long time, but I didn't really realize that
oh yeah,
that simple can make even more of a difference.
Oh yeah.
Just for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of examples. Animal Charity Evaluators, ACE, gave me some interesting perspectives. Faunalytics, which is a very effective animal organization. Gave me interesting insights. I love sharing their stuff in the book. They're really, really insightful stuff. I mean, my interview with Paul Shapiro was really enlightening in ways you'll see in the book. My interview with Bruce Friedrich was a really good learning experience. I mean, he runs a $50 million organization, Good Food Institute. He gave me a lot of food for thought.
Wow.
So Bruce Friedrich, Paul Shapiro gave me a lot to think about. Joanne Molinaro, she wrote the Korean Vegan cookbook and runs the Korean Vegan brand. She gave some interesting insight, as did Carly Bodrug, major New York Times bestselling author. And people like Dan Buettner from the Blue Zones. It gave some really interesting perspective too about reaching the mass audience, which is what we're trying to do.
I really enjoyed that book that you shared with me.
Oh,
by Dan, yeah.
Oh, good,
It's great.
good. So, yes, there were some wow moments.
Sure.
That even though I've been doing this for 30, and I'm trying not to give away too much, so I'm kind of meandering here because I want people to read it. Of course, I want people to buy the book because that helped. Like, we're actually even with the book sales, we're raising money for these effective charities through the book sales, and that's all important. But I also want people to read the book. I don't want them to just like. This is one of those books where if people buy it and read it, like read the whole thing, because we buy a lot of books and don't really read them. You get a cookbook and pick out like 2 or 3 recipes. Yeah. This is the kind of book that I really want people to read.
Sure.
All of it. I mean, I've read it 20 times, maybe more, start to finish, 20 times.
Yeah.
And I get inspired every time. I get emotionally moved every time. I learn something, even though I wrote this. I wrote it. I learn every time because it's like, oh yeah, this is what Paul Shapiro was talking about when he said you can't just win arguments with non-vegans. You have to win them over.
Right.
You can't just. It's not enough to say, well, if people just understood our facts, if they just understood, if they only knew the truth. No, that's not it. Many people do know that animals suffer and they don't care. We have to change habits.
Sure.
We have to reduce recidivism. We have to acknowledge there's high levels of vegan recidivism, meaning that people who subscribe to veganism claim to be vegans and then go back and start eating animals or animal byproducts later on in life. That's reality. We can't ignore that and pretend it doesn't happen and say, oh, they were never really vegan in the first place, which is what vegans want to say. That's not helpful. That doesn't help these guys out here. It doesn't help these cows that are, they got however many months left or until they're going to be turned into food. We have to win people over.
Sure.
And you do that through taste, cost, and convenience of food. We can't just, one of my slogans, Alex, is that we can't just change hearts and minds. We have to change menus and meal plans too.
Yes.
We have to change habits, right?
Completely.
You can't just have this moral imperative and expect that to carry you through your entire life when you naturally get new interests, including palate interests, and people want to experience new things. And you can say all day long, well, that person was never really in it for the animals, that person was never vegan, or that doesn't matter. What matters is the net result of somebody's actions.
Yes.
And why we can't overlook those who are not vegan, but who contribute dramatically to the reduction in animal suffering.
Yes.
These are people who follow a plant-based diet, perhaps inspired by the health benefits of they're following Gregor or Forks Over Knives or whomever, and they decide that or Chef AJ, and they want to just eat plants, and they oftentimes improve their health biomarkers. They often lose weight. They often stick with it for a long, long time, even if they still wear leather belts or even buy leather shoes. You could say that person's a hypocrite, or they're this. No, this person's making a big difference, like in supply and demand. Like they're making a big impact here. You don't have to have this strong moral agenda or ethical imperative to be impactful. In fact, even many of the largest plant-based food companies in the world have tons of non-vegan investors. What, you're going to say that company's not legit now because like Beyond Meat took investments from all kinds of celebrities, athletes, musicians, all these non-vegans. No, that's the only reason that company is around and at the scale that it is, because they took investments from these non-vegan people who believe in a more sustainable future, whether they live that in their own lifestyle or not.
Yes.
You're going to take the millions of dollars from Shaq, you know, you're going to do it. And how I have stories in the book of how non-vegans, some non-vegans have been some of the most influential in reducing animal suffering. And you may say, Robert, that's an oxymoron, or why are you even giving oxygen to those kind of people as far as giving them press or whatever? It's because they've made a significant impact, and we have to understand that it's a combination of grassroots animal rights activists, community organizers, plant-based dieters, influencers, celebrities, entrepreneurs. It's all of it.
Yes.
And you cannot exclude the non-vegans who contribute to the growth of the movement, or else we would be nowhere without a lot of their investment money, without a lot of their platforms, without even the guys like Jim Cameron, who switched over, some years ago to doing an exclusively plant-based diet, vegan lifestyle, and be open to people changing. There's a story a brief story, it's very brief in the book, probably only a few sentences, but about how Jon Stewart, the comedian who had his own TV show for like 20 years or something, and I hear he's coming back. That's what I heard. He found a vegan book at a vacation rental, read it, and decided to change his lifestyle, decided to open up. He and his wife Tracy opened their own animal sanctuary. And again, this was a non-vegan guy who found some inspiration, found some encouragement, found some motivation to change habits and lifestyle, and look at the platform that he's got,
Yes.
Same with Cameron, and who, by the way, had an influence on Arnold Schwarzenegger, who now claims that he eats about a 70% plant-based diet. Jim Cameron's one of his good buddies, and that influence happened there, right? And then Arnold now influences millions of people who follow his work, and he's the authority on bodybuilding globally, the original, kind of king of that world. And if he's saying, yeah, you can do this on a plant-based diet, of course you can. It's like, yeah, some people choose, most people choose not to, but of course you can do it.
Sure.
That gives people confidence. Oh yeah, maybe I could give this a try. And then you get, former Mr., 7-time Mr. Olympia, Phil Heath, who's like, yeah, after I get off stage, I do a vegan diet or vegan lifestyle for months to clean out my system, from all the drugs and meat and all the stuff that has killed so many of his contemporaries and colleagues. I mean, I've known a bunch of those guys. Right. The combination of the anabolic drugs and the animal protein, more than I can count, have died, and he's aware of some of those risks, and so he incorporates a very high plant-based diet. I think his wife was like vegan as well or something. But again, guys like Arnold, who then was inspired by Jim Cameron, who was inspired by Forks Over Knives, Forks Over Knives was inspired by Campbell and Esselstyn and all that. That's how this works.
Yes. What I loved about it was it really encompasses exactly what you're talking about, which is the overall impact and win for animals, for all of us, because being a vegan over a decade now.
My man.
Time going by.
My man.
My man. Let's go. October 7th, 2012. Okay. That was the day. And, for me, I've been involved in the vegan community. I've met hundreds of different vegans, non-vegans, of course, as well. Some vegetarian, some full. And there is this sort of energy with some that is we're against or we're versus the meat eaters, or where it becomes this personalized, stereotype that some people have, right? It's like, there's even jokes about it. I'm sure you've heard, But what I've noticed about this particular book and this approach is it's getting away from these smaller, to me, what I consider trivial differences.
Yeah.
of our codes versus somebody else.
Right.
To actually know, hey, how can we all, whether vegan, non-vegan alike, really express the root of it all, which is compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion, care, impact, because I know people care. One of my best friends in the world's not vegan. I love him. He knows all about it. He loves it. And now, over the course of me knowing him, he says, hey, you know what? I'm 70, 80% now, brother.
Yeah.
He's like, every now and then I'll go to a barbecue and I don't let it completely affect me, but he goes, for the most part, yeah. And that's a huge win. That's a huge win. And, and that was from me not, pointing that finger. And of course we want to hold each other accountable and make more of an impact.
Mm-hmm.
But, to me, this is what this is really about is taking away that sense of our own selves and really looking at it from a big picture perspective. I think that sense of self and our own values is important. I do express that for sure. I understand it. I understand even that whole narrative. But I just really feel like, well, what's the real win for the animals? Past Alex, past what I'm doing or what I think or feel or my perspective. What's the data suggest? And me being a data analyst by trade, I'm always looking into different metrics and variables and how those things can change, and then that changes the conclusion. And so that's I've never really read a book like this, especially in the vegan world, or in impacting animals. So I'm so excited for the world to have it, and I'm grateful that I got a chance to read it first and foremost.
Yeah.
I mean, I am grateful to the bone. So, but I wanted to share that perspective is that it passes my own beliefs and just perspectives into a bigger picture, and that's what's really helped me is being able to quantify the impact.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Alex. And you're right that it is designed to be welcoming for everybody, because we can't do this. We've got a population of 75 to 100 million people who are vegan globally, if we're being generous.
Yeah.
We can't do this without the other 98%.
Yeah.
We need other people on board. We need other people to say, yeah, you're right. Those are horrible conditions those animals live in, or what they go through. We need to find other ways. We need to find alternative sources of protein. We need to find more compassionate ways to live. We need to find the confidence that we can build our bodies without the need of animal protein. We need to find a taste, cost, and convenience level that is on par with animal protein as it is today, for people to really embrace this thing. And so we need the general population. We need the general public. We need the 98%. We can't say that we're better than you. We can't say it's us versus you. We're going to lose every time. We've been losing for 60 years.
Yeah.
There's been an animal rights movement for 60 years. We're losing. We're losing all the time. We need everybody else.
Yes.
And there's room at the table for everybody. We need to have these conversations about how we can help others and why it matters. Why compassion matters, why empathy matters, and learning what approaches will do the most good, and then doing whatever those turn out to be.
Yes.
And that's the cool thing about writing this book, Alex, is that it wasn't just a bunch of my ideas. I mean, I'm not going to give it away, but in the conclusion, the actions I've decided to take as a result of writing and reading the book are completely different than the actions I've been taking for the better part of 28 years.
Wow.
As a vegan. Now, not all of them.
Sure.
These aren't all I'm just changing everything. Everything's out the door, out the window. I'm starting over. No. That's how profound it is.
Yeah.
Is that my biggest contributions to reducing animal suffering now are relatively new actions that I wasn't taking before I wrote and read this book.
What a powerful note.
And that is what I think is going to make a big difference.
Yes.
That if everyone can come to their own conclusions, they might be similar to mine. And that's the thing. The book has conclusions, but they're open to your own interpretation of those conclusions. It's what you decide to do with that information. I have the conclusions, and then I say, this is how I've decided to act on those conclusions. This is what I'm doing as a result of learning this information.
Yes.
So it's up to the reader. It's up to you. But my hope is that a bunch of us come together collectively, combining our powers, like the Power Rangers, or the Ninja Turtles, or whomever, Captain Planet, Earth, Wind, Fire, Water, whatever. The idea is that we all come together and we all do. Basically, all I'm asking, Alex, is that you do more than you were doing yesterday to help animals. And so, yes, there are some ways that we can measure that are far better than others. But if you can't do the most good, just do more than you were yesterday. And that matters. And I know it matters. And I mean, I grew up, I keep looking kind of over your shoulder here at all the chickens walking around and the geese over there, and there's cows out in the field and
just geese in it.
And, you know, I've spent a lot of time around animals. I know that that we all share this universal truth, that we all want to live our lives free of fear, pain, and suffering as much as possible.
Yes.
That's something that's universal. Whether that's Poo-Poo the dog over there, who's done a great job of not barking. It's been unbelievable. Oh, he's sitting right there.
He's vibing out.
Yeah, I thought he was like in the house. He's hanging outside and he's been so quiet.
He's
Good
enjoying
boy.
himself. He's at bliss.
He's, I don't know if maybe you can't see him. He's behind the tree. I see him just fine. He has a little blue jacket on. He's just looking out the fence, looking out in the field.
He's living his best life.
And that's the honking of the geese you hear now. But yeah, so whether it's Poo-Poo over there, or whether it's that goose that just honked, or the chicken, the gray chicken that just walked by, or the cows that are in the yard over there in the field, or you sitting here, me sitting here, we have this desire as much as possible to live a life free of fear, pain, and suffering. And that's the gift that I want to give to others. Everyone I encounter, really, you know, may you be at ease, may you be free from suffering. That's the slogan. And the beautiful thing about living an authentic, compassionate vegan lifestyle is that we get to do that every day with our actions, with our purchase power, what we do and do not support, what we choose to invest in and not invest in, what we decide to put on the end of our fork and put on our dinner plate and put into our mouth. This matters to all these individuals out here. And that's why I want to extend compassion to all. And I've just given people a really, really solid manual and playbook on how to do that really effectively.
And on that note, Robert, with that mission, very well done.
Thank you.
Very well
Thank you.
done.
And I'm telling you, in a couple of weeks, you're going to be holding the actual book, and you'll be one of the first to get it. This is a postcard, but the actual book, you're going to be one of the absolute first people to hold a physical copy, and I'll have those in a couple weeks. It is cold, man. Boy, I know. And I was like, man, my legs aren't even on camera. We could have had like blankets. We could have had hand warmers. I mean, I actually was like, my neck, I was like going to put this on during the interview. I pulled the hood, and I'm wearing like the wimpiest hoodie too. I could have worn layers. But this is the first sit-down interview about the book. But no, really, Alex, we've gone for over an hour here in the cold.
Yes.
And we're probably going to do a lot more filming, even out here on the farm, maybe even today. But we definitely need a few more layers on. But I appreciate you sitting down with me to listen about this new book and hear me share my enthusiasm.
100%, 100,000%. Yes, no, I'm a mega fan myself, and so being able to be here and do this is for me very special, very meaningful, especially with my main man, my friend Robert. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Sorry, my hands are freezing.
Mine too.
Yours are a little warmer than mine.
We're stuck.
We're stuck. We can't get out.
No, but
frozen.
Yeah.
Frozen.
But no, it's been a joy. Thank you for this. And yes, everybody, look forward to The Impactful Vegan. One of my favorite books of all time. I'm excited. Let's take action, make it happen.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. I hope you glean some insights from this. Alex and I are going to be doing a lot of interviews, actually. We might even be breaking down the book chapter by chapter, talking about very specific nuances and very particular topics in subsequent interviews. We'll do some here on the farm. It's great. It looks great out there. It's sunny. We happen to be in the shade in the barn where the wind's coming in. So we got a little cold today, but we have a lot more coming. And so please stay tuned. Alex is going to be interviewing me, talking about lots of different subjects within the book. We might even dive really deep. We did a little bit of that today, where we kind of got into some of the weeds, and I think we'll do that a bit more. Definitely do some weed whacking, and that's what we're gonna do, and hopefully you learned a little bit about the Impactful Vegan, and you feel compelled to pick up a copy. It comes out June 25th, 2024. We didn't really even talk about how, every copy sold feeds a vegan meal to a hungry child in the developing world through my partnership with Food for Life Global. We didn't talk about that. We'll talk more about effective vegan altruism and really what that means. We'll talk about the Strong V. We'll talk about, I mentioned the Vegan Strong Method, but only by title. But,
sure.
And that's a huge chapter in the book, and it's one of the most effective things that I personally do. And so we'll talk about the Vegan Strong Method. There's something I created called the Vegan Kaizen System, which is something really exciting to talk about as well, about these small incremental steps of forward progress until you get to the improvement that you're seeking. And it's patience, and it's understanding big picture. It's understanding that you can connect the dots by doing one action that helps support the next and support the next and support the next, and it doesn't become overwhelming. It's not too difficult to handle and to manage, and it becomes something that leads to tremendous results over time, basically compounding. We're talking about compounding things here. And of course, I only mentioned, like 3 or 4 people by name. I interviewed nearly 40.
Yeah.
So we have,
Yes.
We have a lot of other people. I didn't even talk about some of the big interviews in the book that carry a lot of the weight and who distill some of the information that ends up contributing to the conclusions of this whole book. So there's so much more to cover. Is the point.
There's a lot to dive into, a lot of subject matter, and I'm excited for every step of the way. So definitely stay tuned, and we're looking forward to sharing all of that with you first and foremost.